This episode may contain language or discussions that may be offensive or triggering. Refer to the episode summary for details. Welcome to SheConfidential. I'm Charlene Ketchum, and today I'm chatting with financial coach Stephanie Lyons, and we are going to be talking about ways you can improve and up your financial game so that you can live a life that you can thrive in with your money management.
Wonderful. Well, I am excited. Thank you.
I am too. And so I sent questions, and I added a new one because and so I was like, this kind of worked out because I have recently been talking. I featured some guys on a couple of episodes because, you know, one of the key things that can contribute to our personal happiness are our relationships. That's a big factor. The relationships we have with other people. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, can you feature some men kind of telling us how they think, what they want, what they need, all those things? And I'm like, okay, because as women, we usually talk to other women about what we think about men. And we're trying to figure, like, you know, even married women, it's like, oh, why doesn't he do this? Or, you know, how can I get him to do this? And we're talking to other women. And so I had a lot of people ask me, can you ask the man all these questions we kind of have? So I put together a list of questions, and I had 2 episodes where I got to talk to 3 guys. One is a therapist, personal trainer, and he was great because he hears relationship stuff. Like, he's a pseudo therapist with people, with his clients. And then another one is a chef and small business owner. And that's what's been running like the last couple of weeks. And they dished great details. But one of the things that they didn't hit on a lot, but a lot of women kind of talked about, was just like the financial dynamics that come up in relationships, because we also know that finances can be a huge conflict source in marriages and even in dating. And so I thought about, when I talked to Stephanie, I don't think we really talked about that component as much, because, you know, I've had a couple of people too, with everything happening with inflation and the pandemic, and budgets are getting tighter, and people are starting to have those conversations that never had them before. They just kind of did their own thing. And so I want to open by asking you, like, what advice do you have for couples as it pertains to managing their money and their budgets? Like, when should they have that conversation? How do you have that conversation?
I am so glad you added that question. When I saw it, I thought, it's perfect, because finances is one of the top reasons that people break up or get divorced. And it's one of those topics that is so sensitive that we just avoid it, right? But it's one of the topics that we should not avoid. And I actually advise couples to begin money conversations early while you're dating. And I'm married. I've been married for 15 years. So while we talked about certain things dating, right? We talked about credit reports, and my husband will tell you, I helped him clean up his credit, and we talked about bill paying. I now know that we as a couple should have gone deeper during dating. And as a financial coach, what I've learned is many of us have our financial stories by the time we're 7. When we're 7 years old, we kind of have a baseline for financial management, which is really what we've learned from our parents. And maybe those are good lessons, maybe they're bad lessons. So sometimes we have to unlearn things, right? But whether we're a spender or a saver, and how we feel about money and our behaviors and our mindsets, those are the things and the topics that need to be discussed. Honesty about marriage is essential for trust, right? And so there is a topic of financial infidelity, where people hide their money. They don't talk about, and they're not fully transparent about how they manage money, the money problems that they have. And while we talk often surface level about how couples should manage money, and I think that's important, right? Do you have joint accounts? Do you have separate accounts? I think before you get there, you talk about things like your money mindset, your overall beliefs. What are the biggest financial setbacks What are the biggest financial successes, right? What's your financial background? As we get older, have you ever had to file bankruptcy? What's your credit score? What are your financial goals, right? What are your life goals? What's your debt? Let's look at each other's credit report. That should happen before you go down the aisle. Let's see, what are we getting ourselves into? Because that's a really tough conversation to have after you're married. You can still do it,
Yeah.
but then what are our spending and saving habits? How are we going to manage our money together? I always recommend that couples have joint accounts. I hear so much about, I see a lot on social media and women, and I'm all for women empowerment, right? I am definitely an advocate for a woman having her own money. But I think that when you get married, you should be combining your finances. How you do it, there are many different ways, right? Maybe you have a joint household account and then you have individual accounts for your personal money. But I think that there is a level of security and transparency that should exist when you're married. And I see so many women get divorced and they're rocked financially. And I think if you take a step back and make sure that as women, you're combining finances, that you have a pulse on the accounts that your relationship has. Even if your husband or the wife, normally in a relationship, there's one person paying the bills, right? There's one
Yeah.
person kind of logging in and managing the financial accounts, but everyone should have full access and full transparency. Those are just some of the things that I think are so important. There's an interesting stat that people are willing to get physically intimate before they're willing to get financially intimate. And that's deep, right? Like I'm willing to share
Yeah.
that with you before I'm willing to share my credit report, because the financial part is the transparency. So behind that, maybe there's the regret or the guilt or the fear of judgment. And so I think that couples should establish routines where they sit down and talk about all of those things on a regular and consistent basis.
Oh my gosh, you just said like so much. I'm like, and you mentioned financial infidelity and the thing with keeping accounts separate. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I have heard a lot of women say, be encouraged, always have your own, and always have your own, always have your own. And then some take it even deeper and say, always have your own in secret, because you never know what could happen. And so you said financial infidelity and people having, accounts and things that the others don't know about, or having spending habits. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have never really thought about keeping that those kind of secrets are a form of infidelity.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of a woman having her own, right? But
Yes.
I don't think that in your marriage you have to keep it a secret. I think that is where we have to unpack why the woman feels that way. Often there is some trauma there. There may have been some hurt from a previous relationship. And when we deal with being hurt and maybe the woman was left holding the bag, and I've been there. I've been in a relationship where I'm picked up and moved for what I thought was going to be love, and it turned out that it wasn't. So I had expenses and I had bills that I was responsible for. So I had to go through all of that in my new relationship, and I had to unpack, oh, wait a minute. I've got this boundary. I've got to have this separate account and really work through. Actually, it's okay, right? I remember being at church once in Memphis. They used to have a large Church of God in Christ conference, and one of the pastor's wives shared that. She said, "Women, you should always have a little bit to the side for yourself," and I'm in full support of that. When I say, having that, you can still be transparent in your committed, healthy relationship, and your husband can have his as well, right? And we all can be transparent about what we have and why we have it. It's just a source of security. So if something happens, if I want to go out shopping or do things for me that are not a part of the household and are not impacting the goals that we have, I want to be able to freely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you just mentioned goals. and talking about like the strategy and the communication that's essential. And a lot of times we just don't think about our finances should be they're a key critical component to those conversations that we have about our vision for our future and our relationships.
It's key, right? And I think of it like when you're sitting down and thinking about, for us, we're trying to buy a home. We knew that we would be in this market this time last year. We started talking about, all right, we need to start to think about it. What we didn't know is that we would have to deal with inflation and
Right.
and still those things, but starting to think long term about what goals do we want to accomplish? Do we want to have children? Where do we want to live? All of those are financial decisions that you have to begin to sit down and discuss before they happen, right?
Right.
So that's the part of the goal setting for
Right.
sure.
And so for couples or people who are dating who hear this, because when we talk a lot about like financial literacy, the reality is a lot of people don't have it. And so you
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know. And so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but since we're talking about this and I'm thinking about if I'm in the audience, I'm listening to this or watching this, and I'm thinking, okay, everything she's saying sounds great, but I don't know how to initiate that conversation with my partner. I don't know how we identify our different options for combining our money. Are those services that someone like you, that financial coach, would be able to assist with?
Great question. And yes, those are things that I would assist with. And I normally like to coach couples. So if I am working with a client and she tells me that she's married, I recommend that both join the conversations, because how can you agree, right? And finances are so important. So I do sit with my clients and I'll talk them through. Here are some questions, right? And one of the things that I recommend is schedule a money date, make it fun. And, I don't want to stereotype, it's not a gender thing, because for me, I'm the saver, my husband's the spender. So when I'm coming with a budget, like, let's talk about our money, he's like, oh, here we go. But I have a friend and it's the opposite. Her husband is the budgeter and she is the spender. So when he wants to sit down and talk about money, she's like, oh my God, I got a headache. She tells me she breaks out in a sweat. So I recommend my clients start with just working with the coach. They can be your intermediary. They can help you to identify a baseline, and they can also coach you through how can we get on the same page. Maybe there's some rituals or routines, a money date. Maybe there's a day of the month that works, but it can a coach can help you, almost like any other neutral third party can help you identify a best way that works for you, works for your relationship, to kind of implement those money systems, is what I call it.
Yeah. And those
Yeah.
money systems would help address a lot of the concerns that are behind that whole mindset of, have something of your own that he doesn't know about, or keep things
Yeah.
separate. Because if you're having that communication and you're having your financial date day, that ensures that both are in the loop. I mean, I've seen a lot of statistics about what divorce and separations do to women, and disproportionately, women take huge hits financially. And a lot
And it
of
breaks
it,
my heart.
yeah, and why do you think that is?
I think that still our economy is not all the way set up fairly as it relates to women. And, that's a whole other situation topic as we think about the gender wealth gap, right? Women are paid 72 cents, I believe, on the dollar compared to men. And then Black women are paid even less.
Yes.
So as we think about that first, right? And we can also think about in the pandemic, women were in a large majority of cases, the ones who had to step away from the workforce to stay home with the children who were now home from school. They were also the ones who were impacted in a major way because we worked the service roles, right? So we were either the essential workers, so we had to go to work, or we were the non-essential workers and we lost our jobs. Yeah. So I think that as women stepped away, and it often happens, right? And we rely on the men to be the breadwinners. Well, when the relationship ends, there is a responsibility for women to make sure that we are equally involved. But I
Yeah.
also think that when the relationship ends, we don't own our power. And sometimes we just want the relationship to end. I don't want anything from him.
Mhm.
And I tell women all the time, especially if you have children, you there are two parts of a divorce ending or a relationship ending. There is the breakup of the divorce, and that is the emotional part, and you may have to work through that. And then there is the business side. And so I tell all of my clients, before you make any decisions as it relates to the business of your marriage, work through the emotions, because
Mm.
we walk away and have to completely rebuild
Yeah.
because we wanted it to just be over. And then when
Mhm.
the emotions die down and we kind of settle, we sit there and realize, like, wait, I deserved more.
Yeah.
And so I often say, you did, and
Yeah.
you should have got more, right? And
Yeah.
my heart goes out to any woman who is listening to this, who may have gone through a divorce or a breakup and did have to suffer financially, because that is tough. I have relatives who've gone through it, and it is heartbreaking, right? Because it is a dissolution of a marriage, but it's also a rebuilding of one's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for women in particular who were in that situation, they're rebuilding after, and this is a question I didn't send you, so I'm putting you on the spot with this one.
It's okay.
But what are some key things that they need to prioritize when they're adjusting to that transition, and they don't have the financial resources and they may not necessarily know where to start? Like, how do they prioritize? Where do they start?
That's such a good question. And I think that it actually starts before the divorce. Empower yourself with knowledge. That is why, if we go back to the very first kind of when we talked about making sure that you're involved in the finances,
Mhm.
make sure that you're aware of all of the funds that are right now a part of your household, so that when you begin to go through the divorce proceeding process, you can provide full transparency to the finances, because just financial infidelity is a real thing, and we
Mhm.
hear often that men hide funds as well. So I think women have to first get empowered and go through and make sure that they are fully aware and have access to the finances. The second thing is begin to plan your budget before the divorce, so that you can go to the table with, here are my expenses. If you have children, think long term. Often we only think about kind of the now, but think about extracurriculars, college, high school, prom. What are the expenses that your child may have, not just today, but 5 or 10 years? And make sure you're clear on that. And begin to create your budget now. Go through your expenses. And the hard part is you may have to cut back, right? You may have to make some financial adjustments to help you through that process. But the earlier you start with that, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are great tips. Those are great tips. And just getting that full picture, I think, and that's what I keep hearing. And you're using the word empower. And that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite words, because I think that, we can approach things several ways. We can say this is, we can't control other people. We can't even always control the circumstances around us. And we may be kind of boxed in and have limited options for ourselves, but we can always be empowered through having that information and at least knowing what our options are and where our resources are.
And that's it, right? And I think, many times when we talk about budget, everyone some people break out in a sweat, right? And they are like, oh, I don't like that dreaded B word and
Yeah.
all of these things. But I like to think of it, and I like to reimagine it as just your plan. And so when we think about in a relationship, healthy, single, divorce, it's all the same. It is your roadmap or your GPS. And so just as our life changes, or just as our end destination may change, you have to make updates to your roadmap or your GPS, but the foundational elements are the same. I think that when we hesitate, there's I'll talk about, we don't know what we don't know. So maybe there's I found that when people are hesitant to budget, if we unpack that a little bit, there are fears that they'll be restricted, right?
Mhm.
There is the sense of, oh my goodness, I have to actually go back and look at my spending. So there is that element of regret that we
Yeah.
don't want to face. And there is also the part about, if we unpack it a little bit more, maybe there's fear of the behavior and fear that I really don't know what I've been doing. And I think that as we think about budgeting, again, in any form of sense, relationship healthy, relationship breakup, or single, thinking of it as, this is my roadmap for this phase of my life. And so high earner, low earner, student, your the essential elements and the amounts may change, but the fundamentals of, I need to use this as my roadmap or my GPS to get me from point A to point B, those remain the same.
Yeah.
And so I work as a coach with many clients to just say, all right, you know what? Let's take away that fear. Let's unpack and figure out, what is it? Maybe it's the fear of the transparency, no judgment, right? We have all made money mistakes. And I tell
Yes.
everyone, every financial mistake is fixable. It's all fixable, right? We can always do better. There's always another day. And just kind of working through some of those things is what I see helps people overcome. And you realize, oh, you know what? It isn't that bad at all. It's actually kind of easy. And, I tell people, you may even start to have fun with it, which might be a stretch, but, I'm a numbers person, so I have fun with it.
I'm gonna tell you, I don't. I see the more numbers that are on the screen for me or on the page, and I do most things electronically because that way you can have stuff automated and all those things. It's like, but taking the approach of tying it to my goals is what helps. It's just a mindset trick to tell myself I'm doing this so that I can do all the other things. And when you create systems, and working with a financial coach can help you do that, because you can create systems so that you can streamline tracking that budget.
Yeah. And many of the women that I work with are busy, right? So there are so many different methods to budgeting. There's so many different tools and steps and processes that are available to meet people where they are. There are tools for every different personality type, for those who like to track every single expense and color code and write them on printables. And there's people like me. I want things simple because I'm busy, right? And you're busy, and at this point in my life, I prefer not to track every expense. I think it's important, if you're new to budgeting, to spend time tracking your expenses so that you are aware of your spending. Many of our financial issues, and I did a post about this and had so many people reach out to me because I said sometimes our financial issues are organization issues, that we're so busy that we don't realize how much money is going out of our accounts. And so our financial issues become, let me sit down and take some time to review my transactions and look at, we have different accounts over here and over here, and let me see exactly what's going on. And that awareness helps as well. So I think all of those things are key. And the benefit of working with a coach is they can kind of sit down with their clients, very similar to a personal, I equate it often to a personal trainer. A personal trainer is like what do? They'll sit with you, they'll help you create a customized plan. They'll ask you, what kind of exercise do you like? And they will develop a plan based on the goals and where you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yes.
A financial coach is like a personal trainer for your finances. They will sit with you and they'll talk to you about, all right, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What have you tried in the past, right? So I talk about organization, but that's different for everyone. I believe in automation. I believe in scheduling it, set it up. But before we can automate, we have to make sure we know what's going in and what's going out, and that we have the income to support those expenses. So there's that piece of it, but I am all for it. I love that you said automation.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a big fan. The more we can
Yeah.
automate. And I love that financial coaches, and thank you for specifying, like, these are the things that financial coaches can help you with, because I think even for speaking for myself, one of the biggest battles is figuring out how to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And when you're not an expert, you're the numbers person, you're familiar with all these different systems and options. And it's like, yeah, you can go and get a bunch of books, or you could Google it, but then that's time. And so then you don't get started, because it's like, okay, now I got to research this first so I can do it. But you work with a professional and they can lay all of these things out for you. And that makes it so much easier, because then you can help customize a plan for my needs and my goals.
That's it. That's exactly it. And I think it's such a great comparison, because when we think about working out, right? I don't love working out. I don't. Some people do, but I don't. But I absolutely love the results that I get from working out. And so I work with a health coach, and I'm a part of a gym that gives me, of women who are just enthusiastic about exercise. They love it. They talk about meal plans, and they give me different workouts that I can do. And so I go to them because this is what they love to do, and they'll help me get where I want to go. It's very similar with personal finances. Yeah.
And so, and you mentioned the gym and working out, and that made me think of something else that often comes up when we have conversations around budgeting and managing our finances are, the luxury shaming or poverty shaming, and this mindset of, is it, and a lot of people follow certain financial gurus and experts, and some will say that, you shouldn't invest until you pay off all your debt, or you shouldn't have any luxury or joy items until you have zero debt. And so what are your thoughts as to those kind of suggestions and tips that have been shared by others?
I love that you've asked that question. And the first thing is, there is no room for shaming in personal finance. I believe in leading with empathy. And I think there are many who choose to lead with judgment and with finger pointing. And I don't think that it's necessary. And I completely disagree with any of those. I think that everyone's personal financial situation is personal for them. I am an advocate for not carrying high interest debt. Now, I use credit cards because I do think that there are benefits associated with credit cards, right? But I tell my clients, you only charge what you can pay off when the statement comes. So I'll give you an example. As it relates to luxury, I am all for anyone treating themselves. And sometimes quality is so much better, right? You can pay for a luxury item one time and it was expensive, but that quality will last you for, however long. You can pay, and you know this, right? A cheaper amount for an item and it does not last. And so you will have to continue to replace it over and over and over again. And you could have bought the quality. So I am a fan of women, especially treating themselves. However, I think that we have to make sure that we do so within our budgets and within our own spending parameters. And we are not doing it to look good for someone else. So, as we think about the judgment piece, I think we also have to talk about the confidence factor and making sure that as women that we are not overspending just to look apart, but our finances are not in a place to sustain that lifestyle. So again, part of it is a couple of years ago, so I guess, oh my goodness, 2 years ago now, I was on a girls trip with friends in Vegas, and we were in the Louis Vuitton store. And one of my friends was like, oh my goodness, I'm in here with Steph, but she called in advance, she made a plan. So we had such a good conversation in the middle of the store about goal setting, because I eyed a purse there, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to set a purse goal. And I created my sinking fund for it. And I have some friends, and we all kind of created our little funds for our purse goals. And my friend who was there at the time, she was prepared to buy hers. And she's like, I'm going to go ahead and get mine today. And I'm like, if your budget says yes, it's yes. And so that is for anyone, anyone listening. When your budget says yes, yes. And you should be able to freely buy whatever you want to buy with no guilt. And you can look at that item and say, this is mine, no matter what it is. I am not a fan of buying things on credit if it's putting you into debt, because we're seeing a lot of that now, right? With buy now, pay later and all of these things. And what it does is it puts us into more debt, which I am not a fan of, but I am absolutely a fan of luxury items, buying whatever you want and living your best life.
Yeah.
That I'm in full support of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes a lot of people are intimidated by financial, coaches and advising, because they think, okay, I've got this debt, and whether it's student loan or it's credit card, or just, you didn't know, so you didn't make the best decisions always.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, when I go talk to this person, they're going to tell me I can't have Starbucks ever again. I have to cancel my gym membership, because I've seen some people say it like, you don't need a gym membership, work out at home. You shouldn't ever make all your meals at home all the time. It's like, so you don't get any joy if you've got any debt? Like, really? Okay. Where's the motivation? And where is just like getting to have like something happy in life? Is there no room for that? And I think that, that can be intimidating to a lot of people. So I appreciate that you encourage a balance and mindfulness in how people approach the way they manage their finances.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to, what are your financial goals? Looking at your income, look at your expenses, and then how can you make your budget say yes? And it's also making sure that we are aligning our spending with our values. So maybe we can't buy everything, right? I'm not a millionaire, so I can speak for myself personally. I can't buy everything. I wish I could, but I can't. But I would never tell someone that they can't have something that is extremely important to them. We may have to make adjustments. So maybe you can't have this if you want to have that, right? And it's always, there's a factor in economics called the opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost is essentially giving up. Whenever we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And so it is the same in our finances. And I think there's also a part of, when I work with clients, I tell my story. So I graduated college with credit card debt. I went to an HBCU, shout out to Tennessee State University. And when I was there, credit card companies could entice us with credit card offers while we were on the college campus, lined up.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, absolutely. Discover, I'll take that free t-shirt or free coupon for pizza, and I'll fill out that credit card application. And I graduated with no income and thousands of dollars of credit card debt. And so I am talking from my own personal experience of dealing with that guilt and that shame and that frustration of only making the minimum payment and having, 20% of interest. So it was like literally a drop in a bucket, and working through that and really learning how it did not serve me. And so now at this stage of life, realizing that how I manage my finances may be different from someone else, but that's okay, right? It's completely okay. And that's the message that I want everyone to know. Keep your gym membership, get your coffee, right? But maybe we're gonna not shop on Amazon every day, right? Maybe we're gonna and I'm saying Amazon, but replace it with anything there. I have 2 gym memberships. And, if anyone's listening to this, reach out to me and ask me why. And I'll leave that as a little cliffhanger, but I have 2 and I pay for both. And I felt guilt for a while, but then I realized, you know what? both of these work in my life for two different reasons, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's just making sure that people understand that their personal finances and spending within their values is perfectly fine. And a financial coach can help you unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for acknowledging, that you weren't born knowing everything about financial literacy and that you had some bumps in the road, because a lot of times, people see someone like you and they're like, well, she doesn't know what it's like to have to recover from debt or, have to repair your finances. But, you just said like you had to learn as well.
And I think we started, but I'll tell a bit more about my story. So, yes, I absolutely went through credit card, having to repay that. I have student loans. I'm almost done, but they are still kind of behind me, waiting to pay the rest off. But I was also a victim of identity theft. And I helped a family member because I didn't know, right? And in a Black household, you help your family. And I co-signed on some things that I didn't understand. And we trusted some other people and it turned out to be fraud. So I have made my fair share of mistakes. And I often start with that. My company is called Masterpiece Financial Coaching, and it's based off the scripture, Ephesians 2:10, that says, for you are God's masterpiece, because we're all perfectly imperfect and we all have a story to tell. And many of us are not able to completely fulfill our purpose because we have financial concerns. And, I also ask my clients, what would you do if finances were not an option for you? Would you travel more? What would what would your passions be? Because often we aren't really able to fulfill those purposes because of finances. There may be someone listening who had to stay in a bad relationship because she didn't have the finances to get out of it, right? Or had to stay at a job that she hated, but the salary paid her well and she had all these expenses, and so she had to stay there. And that's what Masterpiece is all about. It's first unpacking the guilt and the shame and the regret that is associated and often tied to our finances. And then it's really moving past that to figure out how can you live a life that you love without having to really worry about finances and if you're going to be able to pay your bills. So, yeah.
Yes. And I appreciate that you tied in why it's so important, because a lot of people think, you know what, I'm happy with where things are. I don't care. They're just kind of like I don't care. But you highlighted how many other areas our finances touch. Like there are a lot of people, and we're not, a lot of times people think we're talking about people who earn lower wages, but I actually think, and you probably have the stats and background to speak to this better than I do, but from my experience and observations, it's the people who are the higher earners who are more trapped by their financial situation, because they may have a job where, they're making a certain amount of money, or they have a lifestyle that requires them to make this. And so our finances can drive and keep you stuck. They can either propel you or they can keep you stuck in a lot of places. And so that's why it's really important for us to have these conversations, because there's a lot of people whose misery can be tied back to mindsets as they relate to money.
Yeah.
It gets deep.
Yeah. And, it's deep. And the truth is 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And many of those make over six figures. So it's not always an income problem. Sometimes, our money problems are not always directly associated to income. Many times it is, right? But often we think, things will get better when I make more income. But what happens when we get a new job? We go out and we buy a new car. We go out and we get a more expensive apartment, right? So I encourage many people, when you earn more income, try to not increase your expenses at that same level, right? Try to increase your retirement savings. Use that extra income to pay off your debt. But the more that you can get into the habit and the mindset of, if my income increases, my expenses don't have to increase, then you also widen that gap. And that gap is your sweet spot, which helps you to
Mm.
actually recognize and see the benefit of that extra income. There are many people who earn more income, but their expenses increase at the same level. So they don't really get to feel the benefit of it. And that goes back to what you've said. So they continue on that endless cycle of financial stress and strain. So that's the number one tip. Look at ways that you can earn more income, but keep your expenses flat, or even cut your expenses some, so that as your income increases, that gap widens. And that's the sweet spot, right? That's where
Yeah.
you can really start to make some decisions and live a better life without having to worry about that financial strain.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You have like been dropping all these gems. I know people are going to listen to this conversation, and it should be so much food for thought. And I hope it encourages people to immediately reach out to you. So can you share information more about your company and some of the programs and services that you offer, and whether these are virtual, so that people who can access you?
Absolutely. So I am a financial services professional. I have worked in corporate commercial banking and underwriting for the majority of my career. And Masterpiece Financial Coaching, my company, was started during the pandemic. So my passion has always been financial literacy, financial education. I've offered it in workshops with churches and family members throughout the course of my career. But during the pandemic, I saw how women especially were just being impacted. And I started simply sharing financial tips on Facebook. And I started saying, all right, guys, here's the first thing we're going to do. Go through and cancel unused subscriptions. Call and see if you can, reduce your car insurance since you're not driving anywhere, right? Just providing practical tips. And I'm a coach, but I had a coach, really a friend at the time, who's a happiness coach. And she's like, there are people doing this, and you should tap into this more. And she began to pour into me. So it's so important to surround yourself with people who will pour into you, right? So Masterpiece Financial Coaching, I provide one-on-one coaching services and group workshops specifically designed to help people implement and improve their money habits and behaviors. We start with really going through and helping with getting organized. And then I offer a 3-month package. So clients can just opt to work with me once on a 2-hour session, or 3 months where we really kind of go through all of the gamut and get everyone set up to manage their finances based on their goals. I'm available on Instagram and Facebook at Masterpiece Financial Coaching. I offer a free 15-minute call. If anyone wants to reach out, they can schedule that through my link. And my website is Masterpiece FC, so masterpiecefinancialcoach.com.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for being inspired and expanding your offering, but beyond your inner circle, because I follow your page. It's always practical, engaging, just I love the energy behind it. And it's no shaming. It's about accountability and empowerment. And you just every day you're posting something. And so there's, Instagram is so weird with the algorithm. Some people you just never see. And it's like, I know I follow this person, but I never see them. But fortunately, you're one of the people that I see more frequently. And so I'll see your tips, and it's a cue to me to even remind myself to, okay, let me check in on what I'm doing. And they're always really practical snapshots and tips. And so thank you for that, because you make it approachable for everybody, and you make it less intimidating. And so, yeah, just thank you for everything you're doing on social media and just beyond, and being able to empower and educate people, because this is life-changing. I mean, this is about people being able to live and thrive in their life.
Thank you, Charlene. I'm so glad you said that, because that's my goal on the page, right? Just to make it simple, simplify things. There are so many, and I'm going to put it in quotes, gurus out there who sometimes give false information, to be honest. And I'm not here to discredit anyone. And I really, at one point when I started, I would comment, and I would be in someone's comment section like, that's wrong. That's not. And I said, you know what, Steph? just do what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And so I am not on a mission to have 1 million followers and all of
Yeah.
that. And my goal is to just provide for my audience and my community. So I'm so glad that you said that. And thank you for having me on your podcast. This has been so nice to just sit and talk. I appreciate it. And just thank you again. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. And I will have all of Stephanie's contact information in the description box, both on YouTube and in the podcast app. So you all will be able to find her and collaborate. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.